Good afternoon. I'm Janet Eaton, and I'm the president of the Minnesota Association of Library Friends. It's my privilege to welcome you to this webinar on behalf of MELF's Programming Committee. As folks congregate here on Zoom, and before we introduce this afternoon's guests, please allow me to start off with a brief housekeeping note for our members. We're closing in on the end of 2023, and that means it's nearly time for us all to renew our MELF membership for calendar and membership year 2024. Watch for renewal letters to hit your mailboxes and inboxes later this month, with physical copies going to the most recent address we have on file. If you don't want to wait, you can also download the renewal form right here, or renew your annual membership online and remit dues via PayPal. See the shortened links on the screen and in chat. If you're new to MELF, we'd love to have you join us officially as a member. Dues are low, just $20 a year for individuals and $35 a year for friends of the library groups of all sizes. Libraries and library foundations are also welcome at $35 a year. You can visit our website, mnlibraryfriends.org, for an overview of all the benefits your membership brings. You can also direct any specific questions to our office. It's at info@mnlibraryfriends.org, or you can call 651-366-6492. Use those same contact details if you're a current member, but you're not sure of your current renewal status. Now for the main event. For our last program of the year, we're trying something a little bit different. As our regular webinar attendees can attest, most of MELF's webinars and workshops are structured around educational topics with particular resonance for friends, fundraising, membership solicitation, marketing, and so on. If this is your first time with us and those topics pique your interest, be sure to check out the video archive on our website. Our content today will be described as it's a bit lighter by comparison. You'll want to pay close attention, nevertheless. Welcome to Warm Reads for Cold Nights, Minnesota Authors Recommend. Will include two parts. In a moment, staff reps from two of Minnesota preeminent presses, University of Minnesota Press and Milkweed Editions, will take the stage to showcase highlights from their release schedules. Since we're on the eve of holiday shopping season, I'm sure you will want to take copious notes. You are, of course, welcome to do so, but know that all registrants will be emailed these complete lists from our office manager, David. After we hear from our live guests, MELF will debut a 25-minute montage of winter read recommendations curated for you by more than a dozen of Minnesota's great writers. Whether you're interested in mysteries, memoir, or a mix of everything, we can guarantee you'll come away with a few gift ideas and additions to your own TBR piles. While we're looking at a jam-packed webinar, we also want to hear from you. What books do you recommend to fellow book lovers this holiday season? And bonus points for authors and 2023 releases, but the sky's the limit. While we're looking at a jam-packed, drop your recommendations into chat at any time. If we receive enough of these, David will organize them and share afterwards, along with a recording replay link for today's session and the other promised takeaways from today's program. But please include both title and author name with those recommendations, and series title if applicable. First, let's hear from Shannon Blackmer at Milkweed Editions, which is well known nationally as an independent publisher of transformative library fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. Sure has the potential to change the way we see the world, and that bringing new voices to essential conversations is the clearest path to ensuring a vibrant, diverse, and empowered future. I welcome Shannon to tell us anything more about Milkweed that we should know before we dive into their catalog.
Hi, Janet. Thank you for inviting me. Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon. I'm the Sales and Operations Manager at Milkweed, and I'm originally from Faribault, so it's always a joy for me to connect with my fellow Minnesota book lovers, and it's really great to be with you all today. Shall I get right in? All right.
Get right.
So thank you for inviting me to come chat. These are some of my favorite books for the holidays that'll get us through the winter. All the books I'll be talking about today are available through your local library, the bookstores that are around you, or milkweed.org. As Janet said, Milkweed is an independent literary publisher based in Minneapolis. We publish about 30 books a year of nonfiction, fiction, and poetry, and we're a leader in the field of nature writing and environmental nonfiction in particular. We started as a chronicle, publishing Minnesota authors in the 1980s. Maybe some of you are familiar with that, but now we've grown to publish authors from all over the country and all over the world. Milkweed is a nonprofit publisher, so we really do rely on donors and members like you to support our mission to invest in emerging and diverse authors. So you can learn more about that at milkweed.org, or you can ask me as well after the chat, and I'd love to talk to you about it. So my first recommendation is a book I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with. It's Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teaching of Plants. This book has changed people's lives. We're celebrating the book's 10-year anniversary, and we've sold over 2 million copies, which is just mind-blowing this is her first book in this field with us. And it took 4 years for her to write and work on with us. In the special edition that we published in 2020, there's this beautiful bookmark ribbon, and we have these gorgeous prints opening up each section as well. That's by the artist Nate Christopherson. So if you know this book, you know it changes lives, and it's just a really special book to give as a gift. So almost every day I hear that this book changes people's lives because Robin is an Indigenous woman, she's a mother, she's a botanist, and she wanted to share her teachings on everything from flowers to salamanders, algae, squash, all kinds of things, and of course, sweetgrass. She goes through all the different phases of growing sweetgrass, cutting sweetgrass, burning it, and what that means for Native people. And we learn that every living being is a gift, and all flourishing is mutual through this book. That's kind of a slogan that we take to heart. When all of us succeed, when all living creatures can succeed together. So my favorite essay in this book is called The Honorable Harvest, and it's all about teaching us how to ask permission to harvest our food and maintain that reciprocity with the natural world. And I know a lot of folks that like to read it around Thanksgiving in particular. So it's a really great topical book to dive into. So I know that if you read this book, its wisdom will stick with you every day. So I hope you'll pick this one up. My next recommendation is also a book I think a few folks might be familiar with, The Seed Keeper, which is by Minnesota Dakota author Diane Wilson. Some of you may know this book. It's the Minnesota Book Award in Fiction winner for 2022. And Diane is such a beloved person in the community, such a beloved author. So Seed Keeper is a multi-generational saga about land and farming all in Minnesota. So the main character's name is Rosalie Ironwing. She was married to a white farmer in Mankato, and then when that farmer passes away, she goes back to her childhood home and needs to restart. She's kind of looking for family, identity, her sense of belonging, and this is when she becomes reconnected to her Dakota ancestors through seeds that have been passed down through generations. Diane did a lot of research and a lot of work on this. She was inspired by the stories of these women that would sow seeds into their skirts and into their shirts to save them when Dakota people were removed from their homeland. So that's why we still have Dakota corn and lots of indigenous crops today. So in this novel, we flash back in time to see those really strong women saving these seeds and how they kept them through hardships, and so they could finally land with Rosalie in the present day. I think that this is an essential book for everybody living in Minnesota, everybody that knows about agriculture, knows it's a very complicated subject. So it really offers a wider perspective on farming, gardening, and our reciprocity from the land. All right, World of Wonders. This is an amazing book by Amy Nezukumatatil. I don't know if you can see some of the foil and some of the creatures on this cover. World of Wonders is a book that has bursts of joy truly in it. Amy is originally a poet, and she came to Milkweed CEO and publisher Daniel Slager a few years ago with this vision to have this illustrated essay collection all about the natural world. And that hasn't really been done for adult audiences. So because Milkweed has the support to take on these developmental and kind of experimental projects, we were able to make Amy's dream come true. It inspires a whole new generation of nature lovers. I see young girls of color coming up to Amy whenever we're together saying, you know, with tears in their eyes, like, thank you for representing me and representing our voices in the natural world, that there is a place for us. So for example, she goes through different creatures. So like the narwhal, for example, teaches us how to survive in hostile environments. There's the axolotl, which is everybody's favorite, that teaches us to smile in the face of unkindness. And then there's also the bird of paradise that reminds her of, you know, wearing saris at her wedding and getting to dance with all of her loved ones on the dance floor. So it goes through a whole bunch of these. I know it's also a great bedtime book. A lot of parents have told me that this is like their children's first introduction into all these fun, fanciful creatures in the natural world. And there's plants, there's bugs, you know, it's such a lovely book. And these illustrations are by Fumi Nakamura. They're really unique, as you can see. And for those of us that are near Winona, Minnesota, the Minnesota Maritime Art Museum currently actually has an exhibit with these illustrations and has some essays from Amy as well. So it has this whole huge room that has an exhibit of these. So if you're near there, go take a visit. It's there through the end of the year. And the gift shop also sells a lot of Milkweed books too, and they're really great folks down there. World of Wonders is just a book that when you need some joy about the natural world, when things feel a little dark, it reminds you that this world is filled with amazing creatures, if we can just take a look a little bit closer. I have another one, The Quickening by Elizabeth Rush. This was brand new this year. We published this in August. Something Milkweed does really well is we publish books about really difficult topics that can really focus on the human experience. So Elizabeth Rush is a Pulitzer Prize finalist for a previous book with us named Rising. And in Rising, she traveled to coastal communities in the US that are being affected by climate change. And she proves that we can really root these difficult issues in storytelling, in people, and it's a better way to digest the climate crisis. So in The Quickening, Elizabeth turns to the Thwaites Glacier, which some folks may be familiar with because it's known as the Doomsday Glacier, because if it melts any further, it has capacity to raise sea levels 2 feet, which would destroy coastal communities around the world. So a real doom and gloom topic, but Elizabeth wants to take it on, and she takes it on in this whole new approach. So in 2019, she actually joins the crew of a ship that are the first people to visit the Thwaites Glacier, and they're still to this day the only successful mission to visit this glacier. And when I used to think about Antarctica, it's so far away. Who cares? She cares. You know, there are so many stories that haven't been told. We only know really about these white men's stories of conquering Antarctica. Women weren't even allowed in Antarctica until a few, dozen years ago. Pregnant women are not allowed to go to Antarctica. So she knew that this story needed changing, and she wanted to help do it. So Elizabeth conducted daily interviews with over 40 crew members that were on the ship. So she talks to the captain, scientists, cooks, deckhands, every single person that has a part of the ship and its expedition gets a voice. And we actually include the documentations of these interviews. So the book kind of reads like a play sometimes. It's in acts. So it really feels digestible. It kind of seems like a big book, but it's a lot of interviews that are really fascinating, highlighting voices that have not been told. This is the most diverse and important book about Antarctica that's been published to date. So Along the way, as I mentioned, pregnant women are banned from going to Antarctica. So Elizabeth had to actually push off becoming pregnant for a year to go on this trip. And it's really hard to face the doomsday glacier and then come back and decide that you still want to start a family. That's still, you still hold that hope for the future. And she does. So she keeps that hope by kind of documenting the daily fun and the daily work that's on the ship, but also reflecting what it means in our current climate crisis. We hear stories of the crew members' births, their childhood, and when Elizabeth does start a family when she gets back, we know that there's some hope left in our future. So this is a great gift. It's called The Quickening for parents, those looking for maybe a more hopeful outlook on the natural world and our collective future. I know where there's some few questions in the chat, so let me look at there. So does Sweetgrass have any new content? Yes, it does. It has a new introduction from Robin Wall Kimmerer that she wrote in 2020 during the pandemic. So if you want to hear from Robin herself, some of the stories that she's been told, that's included in the book, along with those new original art pieces that I mentioned. And the place in Monona is the Maritime Art Museum that has the World of Wonders exhibit. All right, I've got two more for you. I mentioned some lighter books so far that you can kind of read a little bit easier. But I think it's important to note that we also publish, transformative literature that's meant to really spark deep conversations and reflections. We want to challenge folks' connections to their place, to identity, to history, and that means taking on challenging topics. So this book is called The Lost Journals of Sacagawea by Deborah Magpie Erling. And it's a reclamation of Sacagawea's mythology-filled life. She's one of the most mythologically, filled women in American history. And that needed to be changed. So Deborah is a Bitterroot Salish author based in Missoula, and Sacagawea came to her in a dream, is how Deborah likes to put it. So came to her in a series of dreams that, Sacagawea asked for her story to be told in a new way. So this book follows Sacagawea from her childhood through being abducted, forced into marriage and childbearing, and finally her role in the Lewis and Clark expedition. And it's not an easy read, but it's more relevant than ever because with the missing and murdered Indigenous women's movement, a lot of folks like to document Sacagawea as one of the first missing and kidnapped Indigenous women in American history, but she's held on this pedestal. But what does that really mean? So this book is an astonishing work of art. It's really powerful. The writing is in first person and it almost reads like a dream. Deborah adds in, prayers. She adds in native words. So we see her look to the stars, look to her ancestors, futures, to try to find hope on this really brutal journey. So there's a balance between reading these really lovely prayers and reflections on the natural world, along with what she's experiencing. So seeing this story through a young Sacagawea's life is truly life-altering and really history-changing. We're trying to rewrite some wrongs here. And it's a really amazing book for book clubs to take on if you want to maybe tackle some harder subjects and spark those discussions. And my last one is The Hurting Kind by Ada Limon, who is our current US Poet Laureate. And she's published right here in Minnesota. So if you've never read poetry before, or if you love poetry, Ada's work is unlike any other. She's one of the most celebrated poets in the country. It's approachable, it's soothing, it allows us to really feel all of our emotions. So the book is called The Hurting Kind, and in the title poem, she writes, "I've always been too sensitive, a weeper from a long line of weepers. I am the hurting kind," which I think we can all relate to. We like to feel our emotions. She wrote this during the pandemic, so it's a bit of reflections on that. She writes about the natural world, her family, love and loss and grief, and it's really something special. So Ada's work as the current US Poet Laureate also includes a signature project, which for her is going to be a poetry anthology called You Are Here, which gathers natural world poems from poets from across the country. And then she'll get to travel to national parks next year to share poetry. So look out for Ada Limon bringing poetry to a national park near you, and it'll be a really amazing experience. So thank you for your time today. Again, I'm Shannon. I'd love to hear from you if you have a book club. We have bulk discounts and promo codes we can offer you. And you'll also receive a link to Milkweed's full holiday gift guide to dive a little bit more into our nonfiction, fiction, and poetry. So I hope you enjoy that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shannon. That was great. And now we're going to hear from Matt Smiley at the University of Minnesota Press, one of the oldest academic publishers in the Midwest. Every year, UMNP publishes more than 100 new titles, a dynamic mix of literature, popular history, and scholarly works on subjects ranging from political science to psychology. Matt, the floor is yours.
All right, great. Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for joining us today. It's a lot of fun to be here with you. I've been with the University of Minnesota Press for about 10 years now, and I love my job as the sales manager there. I get to go out and visit bookstores all over the state and talk shop about books. It's super fun. I get to learn something new every day. We publish kind of a split list where half of our list is scholarly publications, and then the other half is focused on Minnesota and the upper Midwest, the people, the culture, the geography, the history. And those are mainly the titles that I'm going to be talking about today. I've got our holiday gift guide queued up here. So if I can share my screen, do this. And Janet, maybe you can tell me, does that look like it's showing there for you?
Yes, it looks good.
Okay, great. So this is our holiday gift guide. It's got some of our better titles for general audiences, and it also has a discount code that you can use at the end. You can find a link to this on our website if you just go to our current catalogs, and then you can browse through here. I'm just going to be touching on a few titles throughout here, but there's a lot more to dig into if I didn't get tired of hearing my own voice drone on and on and on. So let's dive in here. I'll start with a great cookbook called Smoke on the Waterfront, which comes to us from the team behind a beloved Duluth restaurant called the Northern Water Smokehouse. This new cookbook of theirs will bring 2 decades of expertise to the table, and it features fascinating smoking and curing techniques that are translated into an easy approach that even beginners can master. There's nothing fancy that's required here. These techniques work whether you have a Weber grill or an electric home smoker, or even like a do-it-yourself concrete brick smoker. All you really need is time and enthusiasm to do it well. And this book offers a really contagious amount of enthusiasm. Everyone at the University of Minnesota Press is a big fan of this place. It's one of those must-stop traditions that we all have whenever we're up that way near Duluth. The smokehouse itself just moved from their little deli counter location into a much bigger space in the same building. So they're doing big things this year, and we're expecting big things from this cookbook as well. The restaurant has a huge fan base, so I think this will be probably one of our bigger holiday books of this season. It's a perfect gift for the person, and I think many of us probably know this person, who still insists on getting out there when the snow is coming down and firing up the grill or the smoker. This is like the book for them this year. All right, I'll stick with the Duluth theme here on the next page, but I'll pivot over to fiction to talk next about A Song Over Misquah Rapids, which is a lovely new novel from Duluth-based writer Linda Lagarde Grover. Linda has built a world over the course of 3 novels and 1 short story collection that's loosely centered around a fictional Ojibwe reservation in northern Minnesota that she's called the Mose Point Reservation. And Linda has woven stories of several different characters and families and generations into the fabric of this community. And we see those stories continue here in this new short novel. The main narrative here is driven by hidden traumas that are once again brought to light when there's a landslide at this place called the Misquah River Historical State Park. The side of a mountain gives way, and it reveals a body that's been hidden away in an underground cave. The story then moves from the present day back to the 1970s at the Mose Point Band of Ojibwe Reservation, where the story reveals the personal connections both to this buried history and to the characters' relationships to the land itself. Linda is not just a novelist, she's also a very accomplished poet, and she brings those poetic sensibilities to bear on everything that she touches. She also uses some really fun narrative techniques here, like having a chorus of spirit ancestors, weave humor, memory, and some additional context into the story throughout the book. If you're thinking about this one as a gift, it could work well enough as a standalone novel, but you might also consider giving this book along with the 3 earlier books that kind of work together as a set, as a really nice gift set. Those earlier books are The Dance Boots, which was published by the University of Georgia Press. And then there are 2 that we published. One is called The Road Back to Sweetgrass, and the other is called In the Night of Memory. You can find more about those books, on our website or elsewhere in this catalog. I always love it when we have a new book from Linda. Her vividly depicted northern Minnesota landscapes, her striking portrayals of contemporary Anishinaabe culture, and her gorgeous use of language just always combine to make for an unforgettable reading experience. And now on the opposite page, I think we have my favorite juxtaposition of this whole catalog, which is Linda's beautiful and contemplative novel on the one page, and then on the other page, Godzilla. That's just how our list works sometimes. It's a little bit random. Here we have the very first English language translations of the original Japanese novella, Godzilla, and the follow-up, Godzilla Raids Again. These 2 books were first published in Japan in 1955 by the science fiction author and screenwriter Shigeru Kayama. And, although the Godzilla films have become classics and the figure of Godzilla is globally recognized, these 2 novellas have been largely ignored by the English-speaking world. In Japan, they've been considered science fiction classics almost since the day they were published. Shigeru Kayama was already an established author of science fiction in Japan when Toho Studios approached him for the Godzilla project. He worked on the script treatments for the films first, and then while the films were in production, Kayama immediately pivoted and rewrote the story of those 2 films into book form, which were published just as the second film was hitting theaters. Our translator for this one, Jeffrey Angles, has done a wonderful job of faithfully rendering Kayama's writing, and the afterword that he provides here is really smart and accessible. Kayama's novelizations diverge just a little bit from the movies, and the hardcore fans out there of Godzilla, I think, will get a real kick out of spotting those differences. We unleashed this book back in September, and it's just been a juggernaut for us ever since. We had some idea that the Godzilla fan base was fairly large, but the outpouring of enthusiasm for this book has been a delightful surprise for us. We're already in our 3rd printing. As it turns out, people who like Godzilla just really, really like Godzilla. And this book is going to be a must-have for that fan base. All right. We've got more fiction and translation up next here, but we're going to be switching to a medieval epic with Tina Nunnally's new translation of Olaf Audenson, which is a sprawling 4-volume medieval epic that was first published in Norway in the 1920s by Nobel Prize-winning author Sigrid Undset. The 4th volume is just coming out this fall. Many readers know both Sigrid Undset and Tina Nunnally from Penguin's modern editions of Kristen Lavenstrader. That book was huge. Tina's work on it as a translator earned her a knighthood from the King of Norway. And when Sigrid Undset won her Nobel Prize in 1928, it was these 2 works considered in tandem that the judges mainly considered when deciding to award her the prize. Olaf Audenson is very different from Kristen Lavenstrader. It's a very dark book. It's 13th century Norway, and we're following the Norwegian Civil War, and there's something like 100 years afterwards where they had dozens of different kings who were all laying claim to the throne at the same time. The 4 volumes of this series center on 2 young people, Olaf and Ingunn, and their doomed love for each other over several decades, as this seemingly endless cycle of blood and revenge sort of swirl around them as they battle to be together. The book is a fascinating look at medieval Norway, and it's sort of a intensely violent culture in which murders were frequent, but they were legally permitted as long as you paid the deceased family the proper amount of blood money. And then at the same time, Norway had this upstart religion, Christianity, that was starting to take hold and challenge some of these old ways. So there's a bit of a culture clash going on as well. There's romance here, there's mayhem, there's political intrigue, and it's all woven together by one of the greatest author-translator combos around. I think of it as being kind of a lot like Game of Thrones, just there's nothing supernatural about it, and it's actually got an ending that's actually complete and satisfying enough to do justice to the 1,000 pages or so that precede it. All right, next we'll make a big switch to children's books with Sam and the Incredible African and American Food Fight. This debut picture book from acclaimed Minneapolis writer Shannon Gibney explores both the beauty and also the anxiety of living in a mixed heritage household, as experienced by a young boy during his family's occasionally tense family dinner times. 6-year-old Sam loves both the Liberian and the American food that's cooked at his house, but he hates the tension about what he should eat for dinner each night. His father's side of the family always wants to make traditional Liberian dishes like peppery torboge soup. His mother usually wants to prepare dishes that she grew up eating in Minnesota, like pizza or pasta. And Sam can't quite figure out how to solve this very particular incredible food fight until his stomach steps in and helps him save the day in just a wonderfully funny and relatable ending. It's a super cute family story, and I love the vibrant, colorful art from Charlie Palmer, some of which you can see here in the catalog. There are also a few sample recipes from both sides of the family that we include in the back, so young readers can try some of these flavors for themselves. We'll do music next with Blood in the Tracks. This book is an oral history behind the Minneapolis recording sessions of Bob Dylan's classic 1975 album, Blood on the Tracks. The recording sessions for the album began at A&R Studios in New York City in 1974, but Bob Dylan didn't really like the way that everything sounded after he listened to a test pressing of the record. So he and his brother went back to Minnesota, and they gathered some local Minnesota musicians to re-record half of the album at Sound 80 Studios in Minneapolis. When Blood on the Tracks was eventually released, 5 of the tracks from the Minneapolis sessions ended up on that landmark album. And here's the thing, though. Even though that best-selling album is now recognized in the Grammy Hall of Fame, it's considered a masterpiece, you know, the 6 contributing Minneapolis musicians never received any official credit. They're not even listed in the liner notes. So this book provides their stories. It uses hundreds of hours of in-person interviews, and the authors Paul Metza and Rick Sheftrick reveal the story of this recording, and they trace the session's impact on the later careers of the session musicians, and they offer a look at the remarkable music scenes here in Minnesota in which each of the studio players came up. This is a really swift and breezy, very readable book. It's chock full of intricate, intimate details that Dylan fans will, I think, devour and probably argue over for years to come. On the opposing page here, we go back to food with a memoir from Matthew Bott called The Last Supper Club. Matt is an associate professor of English at the University of St. Thomas, and during a recent sabbatical, he decided to take on a job waiting tables to make a little extra money. He'd always loved waiting tables before he was a professor, and this time he manages to snag a job with a fine dining establishment called the Brewer's Table in the Surly Brewing Facility, which was a huge success here in Minneapolis. For a brief moment in time, it was lauded as one of the very best fine dining establishments in the whole country. Matt really revels in the high expectations, the high stress, and the highly pressurized world of fine dining. And his enthusiasm for that work is truly contagious in these pages. There are many restaurant books out there, of course. I think most of them give insight into that world from the point of view of the chefs or maybe the owners. But Matt does something a little bit different. He's, showing readers this world from the controlled chaos of the front of house service. Matt is a really charming storyteller, and he fills this one with great humor and sincerity. We think that anyone who loves a good meal out on the town and kind of wonders what goes into the secret sauce of high-end restaurant touring will, I think, enjoy this invitation to take a peek at the recipe. We're going to skip ahead here a little bit. A lot of these books aren't going to be out in time for the holidays. I'll pause here really briefly to talk about some of our best-selling backlist books. The first one is the Great Minnesota Cookie Book here. This is a wonderful collection of cookie recipes that have been gathered over the years by the staff at the Star Tribune as part of their holiday cookie contest. I think it's probably going on right now, and they really focus on unique recipes. You know, these aren't the everyday chocolate chip cookies that you're going to see. There's some really fun and special recipes in here, and it's great for this time of year. Another really seasonally appropriate one here is the Sous Chef's Indigenous Kitchen from Sean Sherman. This is probably our best-selling book of the modern era of the University of Minnesota Press. It comes to us from Sean Sherman, who's the owner of Awamni Restaurant in Minneapolis and sort of the proprietor of the Sous Chef brand. His whole approach is focusing on ingredients that predate European contact with the indigenous Americas. And so it's both a delicious collection of recipes, but also a really important work of cultural preservation, of preserving these indigenous foodways. It won a James Beard Award a couple of years ago and is just really, really special to everybody here. And then at the bottom here, I'll skip down to the bottom for Goodnight Loon. This one is just a really fun little pastiche of Goodnight Moon. You know, it's a board book. It's perfect for little kids who are maybe you're putting to bed and you want to mix it up a little bit from Goodnight Moon. You can give them Goodnight Loon. It's a great little satirical Minnesota spin on this beloved children's classic. From there, I can go and talk about Trauma Sponges next. This is a memoir from Fire Captain Jeremy Norton, and it offers a clear-eyed look at the experience and the culture of firefighting and medical first response in South Minneapolis. Norton's affecting stories range widely across his experiences, from his early training as an EMT to his current role as captain at Minneapolis Fire Station 17, where he's responsible for the lives of his crew as they respond to fire and medical emergencies. Jeremy's writing covers the harrowing, heartbreaking daily calls that affect all emergency responders, of course. But he also spends a great deal of time in this book calling out the toxic masculinity, the racism, the misogyny, and the untreated PTSD that is still just all too common in the cultures of emergency services. These aspects of the book are what really separates it, I think, from other firefighter or EMS memoirs that are out there. This book is powerful and direct, and I think it will really be eye-opening for people. Folks who are involved in emergency response will walk away from reading this book probably nodding their heads in agreement with a lot of what Jeremy says, and folks who aren't involved in that line of work will, I think, be profoundly more informed about what goes on when they're seeing those lights and they hear those sirens go whizzing by. I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit more, and I'll go to page 24, and I'll talk about just one more book here, The Ski Jumpers from Peter Guy, which you can see at the top of page 24 there. This is Peter Guy's newest novel. It's called The Ski Jumpers. Peter's writing is deeply grounded here in the Midwest, and I find it to be particularly gifted at writing about the men who call our wintry landscapes home. Several of his novels revolve around complicated relationships between fathers, sons, and brothers. And in this one, we have two brothers who are raised in a family that's obsessed with ski jumping until a tragic event changes everything. And they all eventually grow estranged from one another as they grow older, tormented by family secrets. When the brothers ultimately reconnect back in their old neighborhood on the night of their father's wake many years later, what begins in distrust eventually evolves into an evening of forgiveness and reconciliation. Throughout the whole book, the family turns again and again back to ski jumping, a topic to which I'm sure we can all relate, right? Okay, probably not. But even for readers who don't have any interest or knowledge in the sport of ski jumping at all, which presumably is the vast majority of us, I think it's really easy to get caught up in the drama of the big jumps that Peter's describing in this book. He just describes the technique and the feeling of soaring and the anticipation of the jump from the top of the hill so perfectly that you'll walk away from reading this feeling very invested in both the characters, of course, but also in this very particular, very niche winter sport. It's a great book club pick, and I think it's the perfect read for a snowy night. Of all the books in this catalog, it's probably the truest embodiment of the theme of this presentation, warm reads for cold nights. It's just a great one to read by the fire. So I think I'm going to end it on that one and turn it back over to the organizers here. Thanks once again for tuning in and for giving me this time to share our list with you.
Well, Shannon and Matt, that was great. What a great selection of books to choose from. Thank you both so much for joining us today. And next, we're excited to debut the montage of wide-ranging suggestions from Minnesota writers. We encourage you to just sit back and enjoy. A list will be provided to you after we wrap today, along with other materials that we mentioned previously. As a reminder, now would be an excellent time to drop your own book recommendations into the Zoom chat. We won't read them here in the moment for the sake of time, but we'll make sure they get saved and shared. Out of respect for everyone's time, we'll wrap the webinar automatically after this last session. And that means that this is my last opportunity to wish you all a very happy holiday season, a productive start to the new year. As a fellow friend of the library, I hope we have occasion to cross paths sometime in 2024. Now, let's play the video.
Hello, Minnesota's Association of Library Friends. This is Kalia Yang coming to you from St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm so excited to share a little bit about my latest release, Somewhere in the Unknown World, a collective refugee memoir. This book contends very much with the issues of our world. It is a collection of stories from 14 different refugees, all living here in Minnesota, but from around the world, from wars across the last 100 years. It is very much a story, a collection, I think, that is integral to understanding our neighbors and the diversity that lives here. A book that I read this year that I love to draw your attention to is Chinese Prodigal, a memoir, 8 arguments by David Shi, a Wisconsin writer. This book, as an Asian American, put, I think, the Asian American experience into beautiful context for me, and strolled throughout are beautiful, beautiful sentences that are sweeping. They take me far away, and yet they locate me very much in myself, which is one of the big gifts of literature when it works. So my latest release and David Shi's Chinese Prodigal are the 2 titles that I like to draw your attention to today. Thank you very much for the work that you do on behalf of this writer and the stories that she tells, but also so many others.
Hi there. My name is Jennifer DeVries, and I am a Coon Rapids-based independent author. I have self-published 4 paranormal mystery novels under the pseudonym Brenda Lynn, and I am thrilled to tell you about my latest release. Angel Baby is the 2nd book in the Regan O'Rourke mystery series following The 13th Cabin, which was released last year. It follows the red-headed protagonist as she stumbles over a cold case that has vexed the residents of River Junction, Minnesota for 11 years. She teams up with local police officer Jesse Hendricks to find out what happened to the missing mother and newborn. With her psychic ability and his burning ambition to become a detective, no team is more qualified or motivated to bring Mia Masterson and her baby home. But when the feud between Reagan's family and the evil Faust escalates, her forbidden relationship with Nicholas Faust crumbles, and she uncovers an unexpected connection to the case she's investigating. Reagan quickly learns that secrets are corrosive and things are not always as they seem. Can she solve the case and protect her family from the Fausts, or will she fall victim to her own vices once again? I was asked also to tell you about a book that I read in 2023 that I really much enjoyed. I'm a big fan of Simone St. James. She and I write very similar stories, all in the kind of ghosty, spooky, paranormal realm. The Sundown Motel was published in 2020, but I read it in 2023. It was a very suspenseful, spooky read, has a lot of family dynamics and history involved in it. Really very much enjoyed this book and would recommend it to anybody who enjoys the same kind of stories that I do. You can find this also probably at the library and at your local bookstore.
My name is Mary Beth Sarter Obermeyer, and this is my book, When Winter Came, A Country Doctor's Journey to Fight the Flu Pandemic of 1918, Mayo Clinic Press. As I talk to readers, this book apparently is much more. It's hitting them on the internet. This is a review. Anyway, this is not so much about flu as about lives well lived. An example to us all. I love it, especially the Iowa winter ambience. Not too long, not too short, just right, heartwarming. My earliest memory of my grandfather, Dr. Pierre Sartre, was on his lap. We had a box, and he brought it from Luxembourg, and it had all of his important papers. He would pull out a sheet and tell a story, and my father would record it on his reel-to-reel tape. Pierre went through boarding school to age 20 in Luxembourg. He took the French tramp steamer to America. He went to medical school in Chicago. He fell in love with the daughter of the wealthiest greenhouse builder in Chicago. He then decided to move to the Iowa Prairie because he missed his small town where the people did not trust surgery, and he wrote, "My heart break." But he found Mayo Clinic nearby, and they could help to convince the people that they needed this surgery. Now I want to recommend a book. I went to the Twin Cities Book Festival, and actually I bought two books. One you'd expect me to buy, The Cello Still Sings, Janet Horwath, and it's about her parents surviving the Holocaust. Her father's a cellist with Leonard Bernstein conducting, and she's a cellist with the Minnesota Orchestra. It's a generational, inspirational story. This book, I had no idea I would read. I don't care about football, but it's Lady Ref, Making Calls in a Man's World, Shannon Easton, Kate St. Vincent Vogel. Shannon, I thought, what was your childhood that made you think you could be a referee? But she always wants to do her best. She's competitive and athletic. She's a 6-time judo champion, and she will get the job done and never lose her dream. So if you want to read a book about football, this is your book. It is very specific, coaches, games, calls, how a referee is trained. But mostly this book is for every woman. It's inspirational. When you are challenged, hang on to your dream.
Hi everyone, my name is Shannon Gibney and I am a writer in Minneapolis. I am just going to tell you a little bit about my latest book. It is called When We Become Ours, a YA adoptee anthology. It's edited by myself and Nicole Chung. And we've got, including us, 15 writers who are all adoptees, writing short stories that feature adoptee characters. And there's all kinds of different stories in it. There's fantasy, there is sci-fi, there's straight literary fiction. We've even got a graphic short story in there. And this is actually the first book of its kind, so it's groundbreaking. But yeah, we're very proud of it. We feel like it really showcases the strength and breadth of adoptee voices right now, and will also appeal to a general audience as well. The other book that I wanted to recommend, I just finished it, is called How to Say Babylon by Sophia Sinclair. This is a memoir, and it just recently came out in early October, and it is about her growing up in a very strict Rastafarian family in Jamaica, and sort of finding her voice. But it's about a lot more than that too. It's also just sort of about the history of Rastafarianism, which is something I didn't know that much about, certainly. And it's fascinating, but also about how do Black folks and Black women find a place for their voice and their stories in cultures that, in a world that largely, devalues us. And just the language is stunning. So check that out.
Hello, My name is David La Rochelle, and I am a children's author from White Bear Lake, Minnesota. My two new books for 2023 are 100 Mighty Dragons, all named Broccoli, beautifully illustrated by Leanne Cho, and See the Ghost, 3 stories about things you cannot see, wonderfully illustrated by Mike Wanutka. But the book that I want to talk about today is by far the funniest book that I have read this past year. It's the middle grade novel, Simon Sort of Says. It's the story of the sole survivor of a school shooting. Now, if you are thinking, how in the world could a story about a school shooting be funny? Well, I don't blame you. But the author, Erin Bow, has done the seemingly impossible. She's taken a horrific event and through the lens of sensitivity, compassion, and yes, humor, examined what it might be like to be the survivor of such a tragedy. With the help of a beer-drinking dog, a vicious peacock, a pack of wild emus, and a whole cast of unusual characters, 7th grader Simon O'Keefe learns that there is more to him than just his past. I would confidently recommend this book to anyone from 6th graders to adults. There's no surprise why this book was on the long list of nominees for the National Book Award. I promise this book will make you laugh, and it very well might give you some insight into the healing power of friendship and family.
Hello, readers. My name is Lorna Landvik. I'm here to talk about 2 books that I hope you'll read, that I hope you'll love, that I hope you'll talk about. Just hoping I can get through this without my arms getting so tired holding the phone. My current book is called Last Circle of Love. It's about a failing, shabby Lutheran church in South Central Minnesota. And the church circle is trying to figure out a way to add money to their coffers. So instead of a recipe book, well, they don't have any recipes left, they come up with a book of their musings. They call it the ABCs of Erotica. A lot of book clubs have read it and tell me it makes them think about their own relationships, and they often choose their own letters to share with me. Ooh. So the book I'm recommending is a nonfiction book by Heather Cox Richardson, and she is so good. I read her newsletter every day, and she writes about what's happening in the world, but from a historical perspective, what's happening in America. You will be enlightened, inspired, frightened. You'll learn so much. It's called Democracy Awakening, Notes on the State of America, Heather Cox Richardson. It's a really good antidote to the ABCs of Erotica, otherwise known as Last Circle of Love. Thank you. Happy warm reading.
Hello, fellow Minnesotans. It's me, your friend, Katie Camello, here to recommend some warm books for cold days. Let's start with The English Understand Wool by Helen DeWitt. This is a book that you can read in a single sitting. It is funny. It makes you think. It's it's unpredictable, and it's an absolute delight. It would be perfect to sit in front of a fire and read this book. And another book that you might want to sit in front of a fire and maybe read out loud is The Puppets of Spellhorst by me. And it's a short book, it's a novella. And so to gather around the table after you've eaten or to sit together in front of a fire and read it out loud would be fantastic. Wait, I know I'm only supposed to do 2, but I'm going to do one more. Monsters, A Fan's Dilemma. This is a book that will make you think, make you feel like you are having a fantastic conversation with a good friend. I cannot recommend it highly enough. There are so many books that I would like to insist that you read, but I'll stop with these three. Remember, books are good friends no matter what the weather is. Stay warm. Pick up a good book.
I'm H.M. Bauman, and my most recent book is Gossamer Summer, about JoJo and her three sisters and their friend Theo, who discover a fairy. But it's a very dirty, grungy, smelly fairy, not at all like a Tinkerbell fairy. And this fairy tells them that fairyland is in trouble, and it's all their fault for telling scary stories that have become true in fairyland. So, of course, they need to set out, go to fairyland, and save fairyland. The book is really about grief and loss and how stories and friends and siblings can help us navigate that. And it has a lot of fairy gardens in it. The book I want to recommend to you also has a fairy in it and is by a fellow Minnesota author, Pyle Doshi's book, Rhea and the Blood of the Nectar, which has a fairy in it. Like I said, it has fairyland in it. It has siblings who bicker but love each other, and it is an epic adventure story about Rhea, a main character who discovers that her brother has gone missing and she needs to go save him by entering into this fairyland and rescuing him. It's a wonderful, wonderful book for middle grade readers, kids about, I would say the sweet spot is about age 10 and up. And I recommend that you go find it, Rhea and the Blood of the Nectar. Thanks.
Hi, this is Loretta Ellsworth, and I'm delighted to show you my first picture book, Tangled Knot, illustrated by the very talented Annabelle Tempest. Tangled Knot is not a word, but it is Fia's hair. And Fia thinks it's perfect, which is why she refuses to brush it, even when it becomes a nest for a mother bird and her 3 colorful eggs. As the spectacle grows, so does Mom's disapproval, but Fia's commitment to being herself might just be enough to change her mother's mind. I hope you check out my whimsical story, which I wrote during the pandemic when I was unable to be with my Tangled Knot grandkids, who I miss terribly. The book I want to recommend is When Fall Comes, Connecting with Nature as the Days Grow Shorter. It's part of a series called When Seasons Come by Amy Bissonnette. This book especially will appeal, I think, to Minnesota readers, as you see how people, wildlife, and nature prepare for colder weather. I really loved all the colors and the animals that were chosen, and I think that this is just a beautiful book and perfect for your local library. I hope that you check it out at your library or purchase it at your local independent bookstore. Thank you.
Hi, this is Chris Monroe, and my new book is Sasquatch and Squirrel. Came out this fall. Here it is. And it's a buddy story between this Sasquatch, Strawberry, and this squirrel, Nutty. And it's told in a comic book format. Kind of a funny story, but it's basically sort of an opposites attract kind of tale. So check it out. If you like comic books, if you like Sasquatches or squirrels, you'll probably like this book. And the other book that I've been reading this year and totally recommend is this book, The Little Wooden Robot and the Log Princess by Tom Gauld. And it's such a great book. I mean, the art is fantastic. The story is great. It's kind of a classic fairy tale with a modern angle. It's funny, it's sweet. It's just a really entertaining book with a lot of great detail. And it's also a comic book format, kind of like a graphic novel for kids and for adults, because it's just really a great book. So if you like comic style books with colorful art and colorful characters, The Little Wooden Robot and the Log Princess, and Sasquatch and Squirrel. So check them out. Thanks.
What if one day you and your friends were biking down a quiet country road and you heard the sound of terrified dogs barking in the distance? Would you investigate? Would you stop? Jessie, the hero of Fearless by Kristen F. Johnson, does just that. She wants to be fearless like her deployed Army mom. So when she and her friends stumble onto a barn with a bunch of mistreated dogs inside, she steals one in a red wheelbarrow. But how will she help a dog with PTSD when Jessie feels anything but fearless? Fearless Middle Grade is set in St. Peter, Minnesota, and recalls the tornadoes of 1998 when they happened upon the town unexpectedly during spring break and devastated the town. Good books can tell a story and still be about serious topics, such as animal welfare, PTSD, and more. And oh my, there's a tornado in Fearless. Fearless would be a great Minnesota and anywhere read for somebody who loves dogs. Recommended for ages 8 to 12, but adults love Fearless too. This would be a great warm read on a cold winter day, even though it takes place during summer. This year, I also read Res Dogs and recommend this book by Joseph Bruchak. This is about a dog who lives on an Indian reservation and how this child who's staying with her grandparents works her way through COVID and has the dog there to help them through the troubled time. Thank you.
Han Nitakiapi. Hello, Minnesota Association of Library Friends. My name is Diane Wilson, and I'm one of the co-authors of Where We Come From, a picture book written with John Coy, Shannon Gibney, and Sun-Young Shin that was published in 2022 by Lerner Publishing. Each of us shares a personal story about where we come from, talking about our families, our communities, our homelands, our traditional foods, and we even talk a little bit about bacteria and dinosaurs. Our book is beautifully illustrated by Dion MBD and was recently selected as a 2023 White Raven book through the International Youth Library. One of the books that I really enjoyed reading in 2023 is the memoir Soil by Camille T. Dungy, which is described as the story of a Black mother's garden. And yes, it's definitely about Camille's garden and her 7-year odyssey to reconnect with the plants and land where she lives in a mostly white Colorado community. But the book is rich with Camille's wide-ranging musings about history, politics, questions about the predominantly white environmental movement, her relationship with her family, and so much more. I really appreciated her vivid descriptions of her plants and her struggles to create a garden that was abundant, healthy, and beautiful in its diversity, creating a nurturing relationship for both her family and the plants themselves. As Camille wrote, "This planet is home to us all who live in this house, our family." Bidamaya.